Probably at wonder why do white people pay so much attention to black people if they don't like them?
Who are these institutions? Who are the people who somehow ended up holding the history of the entire world, especially ours? Because when you really look at who controls the narrative of ancient civilizations, indigenous people, Black Americans, it's the same groups, the same families, the same institutions, and none of them look like the people whose artifacts they are holding. Everywhere they dig, they keep finding us. Put a shovel in the ground, they find melanated civilizations. Every time a tomb opens, they find melanated remains. Every time a map is corrected, it traces back to melanated cultures. And yet, when they find these items, they don't bring them to the people they belong to. They ship them straight to the Smithsonian, the British Museum, the Vatican, German statue museums, university labs, and private hidden collections. But nobody ever asked the real question: who gave them the authority? Who told them they were allowed to become the keepers of our past? The Smithsonian, the largest vault of human history. This is where things get real because the Smithsonian isn't a museum, it's a network, a system, a vault, a gatekeeper. It's the largest museum and research complex on the earth. It has 21 museums, one national zoo, over 9 research centers, a network of 30 plus institutions all under one system. But here's where it gets even deeper. The Smithsonian holds over 155 million artifacts and specimens. That is more than many countries combined. Now let's look into this breakdown. 145 million plus in natural history, 7 million plus in American history, millions in museums of the American Indian, tens of thousands in African American history and culture, and millions more across their art museum, archives, and vaults. But here's the part they never highlight. Less than 1% of these artifacts are even shown to the public. 99% we are sure sit in basements and vaults and climate controlled warehouses and locked archives. So when we ask, what are they holding and why? The Smithsonian itself admits to holding thousands of indigenous human remains, tens and thousands of ancient American cultural items, sacred ceremonial objects and bones, skulls, jaws, hair, tools, pre colonial maps, ancient American artifacts that contradict U.S. historical timelines. The Smithsonian is just one vault. Now, many may ask again, who is the Smithsonian? The Smithsonian Institution was founded in 1846. Go figure. These people are not from here. They're very new to power and discovery. The Smithsonian Institution was founded by a British scientist who never stepped foot in America, James Smithson, a man with no known lineage, no wife, no children, no clear origin story. Think about that. A mysterious European man with no family, no descendants, no public background left money to America to increase and diffuse knowledge. But the question becomes whose knowledge and who decided what should be diffused and what should be buried. And somehow this man's legacy becomes the foundation for the largest museum and artifact holding institution in the world. How did they get all this stuff? They took them. They seized burial sites, excavated indigenous lands, raided American mounds, confiscated items from private citizens, pressured families to donate sacred items, passed laws giving them ownership of anything archaeological found in America. This is why when people find something buried in their backyard, they don't call a Black organization. The first organization people call is the Smithsonian, the National Park Service, university archaeologists, state historical societies, all which are white run institutions. They have positioned themselves as the default owners of global history. But why? Why are they so interested in us? They know exactly who you are because they spend years, even today, studying your ancestors, your bone structures, your DNA, dances, your tools, your symbols, your burial practices. You are not a stranger to them. You are the blueprint. The museums aren't for you to learn about the past. They are for them to study you. And when you see 155 million artifacts in the Smithsonian alone, not even counting Britain, France, Germany, Italy, Spain, extra self, what are they preparing for? What do they know about us that we don't know? Why are they storing our history instead of returning it? Where are the white museums about their origins? Isn't it strange that there is no ancient European origins museum? There is no white American indigenous culture museum, Caucasian museum. There's no Caucasian antique museum. Why? Because they don't have that kind of antiqueness. Their oldest artifact is barely medieval. But our artifacts, thousands of years old, tens of thousands, some say hundreds of thousands. And everywhere they dig, they find us. This is why the museums are full of melanated artifacts, Egyptians, Nubians, Ethiopians, Indigenous Americans, Mississippians, Mayans, Olmecs, Aboriginals, you name it. If Africa is truly the motherland, where are the museums in Africa? Very minimal, underfunded, lacking artifacts. Why? Because the majority of ancient items are really from the Americas, the old world, the true Egypt. When you look into the United States of America, there are more than 35,000 museums in the US overall, including small local historical societies, art museums, science centers, and cultural institutions. How many museums are in Africa? A reliable list showed there are several thousand museums across the African continent. One source estimates around 4,702. But Africa's total is much smaller than the US in sheer number of museum institutions. What this means in context is the US has an extremely dense and diverse museum system built over centuries and including thousands of local and national museums, many connected to institutions like the Smithsonian. For Africa to have 54 countries and far fewer museums by comparison, Now, Native American museums exist. What's notable is that U.S. museums that supposedly hold tens of thousands of Native remains and artifacts, even long after laws like NACPRA were passed, showing how museum collections often remain tied to Native heritage. NACPRA is a federal law passed in 1990 that was supposed to force museums, universities, and federal institutions to return Native American human remains, spiritual items, and cultural artifacts back to their tribes. It was said to be created because over centuries, white run institutions had dug up Native burial sites, stolen bodies, seized sacred items, placed ancestral remains in museums, displayed cultural items without permission. Now, it's said that institutions have been avoiding Native American history. Many institutions drag their feet and claim they can't identify tribes of some of the artifacts that they found. They can't tie those artifacts to certain Native tribes. And some sources say that they simply don't comply. What's interesting, many early remains found in North America show features that do not match the so called modern Native American phenotypes. Anthropologists themselves documented that the Luzia woman in Brazil, one of the oldest skulls in the Americas, melanated features, not mongoloid or Asian derived features. Yes, your Native Americans are not indigenous to America. They are Siberians, Mongolians. The first Floridians and early southeastern remains. Several skeletal analyses reveal traits associated with Black melanated populations, not with more recent Native American groups. The Onyx, massive stone heads clearly depicting broad noses, thick lips, and textured hair patterns. Even mainstream institutions admit they are mysterious because they do not resemble the features. These findings do not match present day Native Americans. So yes, there is a absolutely strong case that many early Americans were melanated. The people that you see now claiming to be Native Americans are not indigenous to the American lands. Not only that, 155 million artifacts in just the Smithsonian alone is melanated. And most of those museums from the Smithsonians are in the Americas. But why would they not be in Africa if Africa is the motherland, if that's where everything supposedly came from? Modern federally recognized tribes are not the original population. The US government invented the concept of a tribe for legal control, not historical accuracy. So when museums say with the Native Americans, we cannot determine what tribe these remains belong to, what they're really saying is these remains do not match the physical features or genetics of the tribes we call Native American today, because they're not those indigenous people. Now ask yourself, were these people really the indigenous Americans, or were they replacements? The uncomfortable truth, the museums avoid saying openly, but if you go visit every single one of these museums, you will see the patterns. Many ancient Americans were melanated. Many were not connected to today's native tribes. The earliest population of America predates the arrival of Mongolian-derived ancestors of modern Native Americans. It would mean America's original indigenous people were not who the U.S. teaches they were. The Native American identity created in the 1800s is a substitute identity. Black Americans have legitimate indigenous roots that rewrite the entire history of the continent. The Smithsonian has already been accused of covering up melanated remains. Multiple historians have claimed that skeleton remains with American features were removed from public view. Artifacts suggesting Negro presence in pre-Columbian America were buried. Evidence that contradicted the Bering Strait migration theory was destroyed. The Smithsonian actively shaped American archaeology to fit a Eurocentric narrative. They promoted the idea that Black people arrived only through slavery. Native American was the only indigenous group. No advanced civilization existed here before Europeans, as they say. Modern Native Americans were elevated and recognized to replace the memory of the original melanated indigenous Americans. This claim is aligned with historical patterns. The U.S. has a long history of replacing one group with another. The 5 civilized tribes adopted Black slaves, then expelled them. The government reclassified free Black indigenous people as Negro to erase land rights. Paper genocide laws reclassified Black natives as colored. Indian boarding schools pushed tribes to deny indigenous American ancestry. So yes, it fits the historical pattern. Melanated indigenous people were erased via paper genocide, law, and forced reclassification. Native American identity was reconstructed to fit a political and racial agenda in the 1800s. Museums do keep discovering remains that do not match modern tribes, and they avoid talking about it because they are not those people. We are. Now, the Smithsonian is just one piece of the global museum system. When you zoom out, you start to see a pattern. The same nations that built colonial empires are also the ones holding the largest collections of indigenous American and ancient world artifacts. The biggest museum holding melanated history are all in Europe and America. Why wouldn't they be in Africa, the motherland, since everything came from there? Why is 95% of the museums in America of melanated people and not those so-called native people that are supposedly indigenous to the Americas. The British Museum in London, UK. This is massive. It holds 100,000 plus Egyptian artifacts, one of the largest Egyptian collections. The Rosetta Stone, Nubian artifacts, indigenous American artifacts, Caribbean, South American items. The British Museum alone has over 8 million objects, most of them not on display. You got the Petrie Museum of Egyptian Archaeology in London, UK, one of the world's leading collections of ancient Egypt. You got the Manchester Museum in UK, has one of the largest collections of indigenous global cultural items, the Kushite, Egyptians. The Louvre Museum in Paris, France. Hundreds of thousands of melanated artifacts in history. The Neues Museum in Berlin, Germany. The Vatican Museums in Rome, Vatican City, with unreleased forbidden archives. Indigenous American artifacts hidden since 1500s. American maps of pre-Columbian colonization. Sacred items stolen during colonization. Most of it is not available to the public. Then you have your museums in the US and Chicago and New York and many, many different places with hundreds and thousands of artifacts. Not to mention that Memphis, Tennessee in the South holds Egyptian artifacts in the South at the University of Memphis. So it just makes you wonder, where is the white history? Where is white museums? Caucasian. But they're so obsessed with us. Museums are not neutral. They are not passive. They are not just collections. They are evidence. They are history control centers. They are narrative machines. And every artifact they hide, every bone they catalog, every item they refuse to return is a piece of us, a piece of our past, our identity, our lineage, our spiritual technology, and our civilization. And that is why they hold it tightly. Because once we remember who we are, once we reconnect to our own history, their power ends. And once you know, to my Black Americans, that you are these people, and that's why they want you thinking you from somewhere else, because you will never pay attention to these lands and what's here already. Because the answer is right in front of you. That's the reason they want to strip you from your culture, your music, your language, your expression, because it reminds them of the very people that they're studying right now, and you are still here. You embody these people, these artifacts, these cultures, these ancient civilizations. They recognize you. The white people recognize you. And they got to keep you as far from these things, because the moment that you go to these Smithsonian museums, which I'm willing to bet a lot of us have not been to these museums, you will start to see the patterns and why they dislike you so much. Yeah, because you're melanated, but it's not just because your skin, because they know who you are, because you embody and do those same things today. And they remember you, they know you, because everything that they're studying leads back to you and who you are. Now, I'm just saying.
The answer is the liar knows what lie he told. So even if I made it deceitful and I made you think that the answer is over here, but the answer is really over here, I'm still going to be looking over here. Me, the one that tricked, because I know this is the right answer. Black people have lost their identity, but our oppressors have not lost our identity.
Man, y'all tell me what y'all think in the comments. And thank you for joining the Z Perspective. Y'all know I break shit down like a pound. And until next time.